on our Jewish journey through the Gospel of John. So previously, we saw Yeshua taken before the high priest, Caiaphas. This is our little excursion into the Synoptics, to Mark specifically. Again, the high priest, Caiaphas, asked him, "Are you the Christ? Are you the Mashiach, the Son of the Blessed? Are you the Son of God?" Yeshua answered, "I am. And you will," furthermore, it's an answer you're not ready for, "you will see the Son of Man," the Bar Enosh of Daniel 7, "seated at the right hand of power." That is a euphemism for God himself, seated at the right hand of God. That's Psalm 110:1, "and coming with the clouds of heaven," mashed together with Daniel 7:13 and 14. They freak out, and as Matthew reveals, when morning came, all the chief priests, the elders of the people, took counsel against Jesus and put him to death. So the Sanhedrin pronounced, that's the Supreme Court of Israel, they, in the wee small hours of the morning, they take counsel against Yeshua to put him to death. They bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate, the governor, the prefect. That's the term. This, by the way, is Pilate. No, not the Pilate that we want to talk about today, not just a Pilate. We want to talk about Pontius Pilatus. Pontius Pilatus, who is the prefect of Judea. He is normally headquartered in the capital of Judea, which is Caesarea Maritima, as the greatness of that city as it existed 2,000 years ago. But he is in Jerusalem for the holidays, for the feast of Passover and unleavened bread. So for this week, Pilate always comes, the governor always comes to Jerusalem, to the hotbed of any activity that we're going to see. So they led Yeshua, Jesus, from Caiaphas into the Praetorium. And it was early. The Praetorium is going to be where, that's the headquarters of where Pontius Pilatus is going to be during this week. Now, as we touched on last week, and I know I went very fast through this, tradition tells us that Pilate made his praetorium in the barracks of the fortress of Antonia, which is right on the western corner of the Temple Mount, which would be right in this area right here. But that's traditionally where we take it and say, this is probably but better evidence is that he actually was staying in the palace of Herod Antipas during this period of time. First of all, he lived in the palace of Herod in Caesarea Maritima, and so he would not take a downgrade to stay in an army barracks, an army fortress. He went to the luxurious palace of Herod in Jerusalem right there, plus the fact that the synoptics tell us he has his wife with us, not taking his wife into a fortress of barracks with the other soldiers. He's staying in luxury, there's luxury accommodations here in the palace, the beautiful palace of Herod Antipas. This is one of the little sections that has been found of that palace. This is steps leading down to a pool. You can get a sense, even 2,000 years later, of the luxury of which it represents. This is the area. This, by the way, this is Jaffa Gate. Those of you who were with us when we entered into the city, this is the only road that actually comes in. They cut a hole there after World War I so that General Allenby could come riding through here. But this is where we enter, and this area right here, this whole area right there, that is where the king's headquarters was. That's where he was. And on the edge of that, on the edge of the walls there, you can see the remaining little two walls that are surrounding on either side of the remains of a staircase. And that staircase would have led up to the entrance where the praetorium, the bema where the Pilate, where the governor, would be pronouncing judgment. So the action is happening here, if you will. A little close-up of what it looked like. And if we want to see what it looks like today, this is that road entering in the Jaffa Gate. This whole area right here is what we're talking about, where the palace of Herod was. And these two little walls, those are the walls that we looked at leading up to the steps. So that's what it looked like. Now, we have historical confirmation that Pontius Pilatus really was the governor. In fact, he's called the prefect here on this tablet. This tablet was discovered in 1961. And wouldn't you know that it has the name of the prefect Pontius Pilatus on it? We didn't know he was a prefect until we saw this, but there's historical validation that what the Gospels present as being true has historical validation. Well, let's get now enough backgrounds. Let's get into the text. Then they led Yeshua, picking back up from John now, leaving Matthew and picking it up in John. Then they led Yeshua, Jesus, from Caiaphas into the praetorium, and it was early. The Roman governors, when they heard petitions, when they were open for business, when they opened their doors and the neon light went on, said open, was generally dawn, let's say 6 a.m., and they would be done by 11 o'clock, noon at the latest, right? So they would work all the morning, hear whatever petitions they needed to hear by 10, 11 o'clock. Generally, they wrapped up. They can get a really nice several rounds of golf, whatever they wanted to do back in the day. That's how it was. And so it was very convenient for the Sanhedrin, for the Jewish leadership who had condemned Yeshua, because as soon as the condemnation and the fun that they were having, blindfolding him and beating him up and saying prophesy and spitting on him and whatever else they were doing to him and abusing him, when they had had their fun and finished with their fun, it was about time for Pontius Pilatus to open up the shop. And so they made their way from the headquarters of Annas and Caiaphas, and their mansion, and they made their way to the praetorium. And they led to the praetorium, and it was early, let's say 6 a.m. And they themselves did not enter into the praetorium. They did not cross the threshold, so that they would not be defiled, but might eat the Passover. Several things need to be unpacked from that. So let's just recognize that we're going to have to deal with why would they have been defiled if they had went into the praetorium? And what is meant by they may eat the Passover? Did not Yeshua and his disciples eat the Passover? Was that not Seder meal that they enjoyed at the Last Supper? Was that not the Passover? What's going on here? And this particular verse has engendered a great deal of heat, but not so much light. Even you would be surprised in the depth of commentaries that are out there, the variety of opinions that we might see as to what that means. Well, let's deal one at a time. First of all, in the Mishnah, we get some insight as to why they did not go into the praetorium, because it is very clear from Mishnah Ohalot 18:7, the dwelling places of non-Jews, and even though this was Herod's palace, for that week, that area, that wing, let's say, of that great extraordinary mansion, was a Gentile dwelling place. So the dwelling places of non-Jews, in other words, Goys, Gentiles, Goys and Dals, they are unclean. Also in the same tractate, Ohalot 18:9, 10 places are not subject to the laws of non-Jewish dwelling places: a gatehouse, the open spaces of a courtyard, a bathhouse, an armory, and the place where religion. I gave you 5 out of the 10. So in other words, they could stay in the courtyard and they'd be okay. As long as they did not go inside, they were not subject to the laws of Gentile dwelling places, so they would be just fine as long as they did not go into the interior of the palace, of the location. So, two beautiful supports from the Mishnah as to why they're doing that. Now, let's talk about why they couldn't enter to be defiled in order so that they may eat the Passover. Let's look at Deuteronomy 16, 2 and 3. And you shall offer the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God from the flock or the herd at the place the Lord will choose. That's the temple, for that the tabernacle, to make his name dwell there. You shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat it with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction. Now, 7 days you shall eat what? The Passover. Now, are they having leftovers from the Seder meal? No, there's no leftovers. That has to all be consumed. So whatever they are eating during the week of Passover, which is really Passover 1-day festival, unleavened bread, 7-day festival that follows right on it, whatever they are eating during those 7 days, it is considered to be the Passover. These terms are used interchangeably, and that came into prominence as early as Deuteronomy, as early as Moses, these words of the Lord. Well, if we go from the Hebrew Bible to the New Testament, we see the same thing. Luke 22:1. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called the Passover. So when one says, I'm going to eat the Passover, yes, you could be talking about the Seder meal itself, that event that kicks off the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or you could be talking about something subsequent, anything during that week of unleavened bread, because the whole thing is called the Passover. The terms are used interchangeably. Now, in Numbers 28, 16 through 19, we're introduced to a special particular sacrifice, and it is this sacrifice that the priests, the chief priests, are talking about here that they are going to be eating. So let's just read the passage. We'll see what we're talking about, 16 through 19. On the 14th day of the first month is the Lord's Passover. That was the previous day. Those Passover lambs were sacrificed. And on the 15th day of this month is a feast. That occurred the night before. Remember, the Jewish calendar goes from sundown to sundown. That's how the days go. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. Offer a food offering, a burnt offering to the Lord. 2 bulls from the herd, 1 ram, 7 male lambs a year old. See that they are without blemish. This is not the offering of the lambs that we know occurred during or prior to the eating of the Seder on the day of Passover itself. That's a separate sacrifice. This is on the first day of this 7-day series called the Feast of Unleavened Bread, this very special sacrifice, which is a food offering. So it is to be eaten that day, and it's specific to the priests in specific. 2 bulls, a ram, 7 male lambs. See, they are without blemish. This is called the Chagigah. Comes from the idea of Chag, which is the holiday. Okay, so the holiday festival sacrifice called the Chagigah. This is what we're talking about here. This is what we're going to prepare ourselves for. And we see there's an entire tractate in the Mishnah called Chagigah in number 1-3. Burnt offerings during the festival week are to be brought from animals brought with unconsecrated money. Thanksgiving offerings from animals brought with tithe money on the first festival day of Pesach. So, in other words, after you've eaten the Seder meal the evening prior, next day, the first festival day, Bet Shammai, the house of Shammai, said that they must be bought from animals bought with unconsecrated money, and the house of Hillel, Bet Hillel, has a different opinion. They can be brought also from the animals bought with tithe money. Point being that why I'm showing you all these verses and passages from the Mishnah is to demonstrate that when the priests, the chief priests, are talking about they don't want to be defiled so that they can eat the Passover, they are not talking about the Seder meal that's already been eaten, that's already been established. They're talking about the meal that the priests, especially the chief priests, are going to be eating and offering a sacrifice, a food sacrifice on behalf of all Israel that morning, and to be eaten later in the afternoon by the priests. That's called the Chagiga. Okay, so when the chief priests are talking about not being defiled because they want to eat lunch, it's not Passover, it is the Chagiga. Every festival sacrifice that week is called Passover. Okay, can be called Passover. That's what we're talking about. So if we look at a second era, and simple looking at Jewish history, Jewish theology, and Hebrew Bible, and understanding truly the chronology of the Passover would eliminate so much confusion regarding how John synchronizes with the synoptic gospels. We have ideas such as, well, Jesus and his disciples ate the Passover meal a day earlier than everybody else in Jerusalem would have had, or they're working on a different calendar. There's a Galilean calendar versus a Judean calendar. And so, well, the priests in the temple are not working with a different calendar. There's one calendar. They were in charge. I'd like to see anybody try to offer a Passover sacrifice on the wrong day with the priests in charge. Not possible. So many different ideas, or that John is wrong, or the synoptics are wrong, or somebody's just writing theologically. All of those hypotheses are not necessary. Here is the chronology. Nisan 14, which is the day that the Passover sacrifice is offered. That's Thursday daytime. Those animals are sacrificed. It's done by 3 o'clock that afternoon. Let's even make it a little bit later, but you've got to get those animals on the rotisserie spit so that they can be cooked thoroughly and fully for the evening's meal. That's the Seder meal. That's Nisan 15, the opening of the unleavened bread 7-day calendar. Thursday evening, the Seder meal is eaten at that time. The next morning is still Nisan 15, the first day of unleavened bread, the first festival day of this holiday, according to the Bible. And Friday daytime, this special offering made by the priests on behalf of Israel, which they get to enjoy as their meal. The Chagiga is offered, and later that day, sometime late in the afternoon apparently, that meal is eaten. So that's the chronology. That's why they could not enter, and that's what's meant by being defiled, because they wanted to eat the Passover. They didn't want to miss out on the first day, the first good day of the holiday. And I hear ringing, it must be true. Okay, speaking of truth. Okay. Therefore, Pilate went out to them and said, so the Jewish leadership, because they couldn't go in and see Pilate where he's holding court inside the praetorium, Pilate, the Roman governor, comes out to them, which indicates to me how powerful, first of all, the Jewish leadership that we're talking about was. And that Pilate really, he's a law and order kind of guy. In fact, he's kind of a vicious, miserable kind of fellow that we learn from history. But nonetheless, he's very much law and order. And he already knows there's a problem with this Jesus of Nazareth. How does he know this already? Because the chief priests had already gotten permission from him the previous evening to release part of their legion, part of their army, the military. He's got a military delegation who goes to arrest Yeshua. You'll remember in the Garden of Gethsemane. So Pilate already knows what's coming and has been waiting for this. And if there's an agitator, somebody who's going to make problems, he's going to make sure that this agitation is put down before it has a chance to percolate and go any further. So he goes out to meet them. But he's a business guy. This is all business. Okay, here I am. You got me. What accusation do you bring against this man? What's the charge? Let's get this process in motion. Let's get the ball rolling. What accusation do you bring against this man? They answered and said to him, well, we know he's evil. We know he's a wrongdoer. And we know he's broken our law as we read Moses. But we can't give a theological reason to Pilate. Now, we got a problem here because our chief witness, Judas, has taken a powder. He's not around right now. So we've already made our decision as a Supreme Court, but the thing that motivated us was the blasphemy that we heard, that he claimed. We can't give this story to Pilate. So they answered and they say something that is completely nonspecific. If this man were not an evildoer, he's a bad guy, we would not have delivered him to him. And since he's so terrible, he's a terrible guy. He's the worst. He's absolutely the worst. Take our word for it, Pilate. We don't want to bore you with any specific charge. I know you're a political guy, and the only reason you'd be willing to hear us and deal with this guy is if this is a matter of insurrection, but we actually weren't able to prove anything in our phony baloney trial that we had in the middle of the night last night. All we heard was something theological that we didn't like. But take our word for it, he's an evildoer. Believe me, he's an evildoer. If he weren't, we wouldn't be wasting your time. We wouldn't have delivered him to you. So Pilate said to him, I'm not going to take it. I'm going to stand for that nonsense. Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law. Don't waste my time. I'm a busy guy. I got golf to play. I got scrimmage, cribbage, whatever else I've got. I don't have time for you. Right? Judge him according to your law. Now, the problem for the Jewish leadership is that if they were going to judge Yeshua according to their law, to the law of Moses, they would come up short. There's nothing in the law of Moses that Yeshua has violated. In fact, twice already through the storyline, we have seen Yeshua when he meets the antagonism of the Jewish leadership, and he said, anyone who has a sin to pin on me, if you have anything that I've done wrong, open your trap, right? Open up, okay? And let's hear the charge. But nobody can accuse Yeshua of violating any law of Moses. So the Jewish leadership, instead of saying, they said to him, well, we're not permitted to put anyone to death. When Rome came to town and occupied the province of Judea, Galilee, this area, they removed the power of capital punishment from the Jewish leadership, except in very rare cases, and there's not one of these cases. So the Jews said that we're not permitted by Rome, that would be you, to put anyone to death. And if we were to judge him by our law, oh, believe me, he'd be worthy of capital punishment. But since you've taken away our power, we are forced to come to you. Now this fulfills the word of Jesus, which he spoke, signifying but what kind of death he was about to die. If the Jewish people had retained the ability to exercise capital punishment, Yeshua would have died by stoning, just like Stephen does. Stephen is actually, it's not really a legitimate execution. It's a mob insurrection. And you know, when a mob gets going, it's very hard to tamp them down, especially when the mob is the leadership of the people, or is comprised of a portion of the leadership of the people, which it is in Acts 7. So if Yeshua had said that he would be crucified and the Jews still had the ability to exercise capital punishment, Yeshua would have been wrong. So John is seeing a theological point, making a theological point here, that it's all according to God's plan. The capital punishment was indeed removed from the Jewish leadership and placed into the hands of the Romans by the time Yeshua would be tried. And that's theologically, it's interesting, I think, because if the Jewish people, through stoning, had put Yeshua to death, then you would have the preponderance of responsibility, really all of the responsibility, regarding Yeshua's death, fall at the hands of the Jewish people. And then you would, for the next 2,000 years, you would have other people calling the Jewish people Christ killers and accusing them of killing God. Oh, wait, that actually happened anyway. But nonetheless, we who actually read the Scripture can understand that, are the Jews responsible, the Jewish leadership, are they responsible for the death of Yeshua? Of course they are. But they share that responsibility with the Romans. It will also be the Romans, because crucifixion is not a Jewish gig. Jews are not into crucifixion. They wouldn't have thought about it. They wouldn't have invented it. It's not their kick. But Rome, oh yes. And so crucifixion, a Roman means of execution, ordered, authorized by Roman leadership at the instigation of Jewish leadership. And just as in the Garden of Gethsemane, you have a little microcosm for the responsibility of the suffering of Yeshua, in that you had Jewish police and Roman soldiers together coming, and so Rome and Israel share the responsibility. So too we have at the trials and the death, the execution of Yeshua, which fits in perfectly with John's teaching in the gospel that the world is the created order, and that includes everybody, Jews, Gentiles, everyone, that they stand in opposition to God. The default position for the world is darkness. Darkness rebels against the light. Well, having said that, let's take a look at these statements of Yeshua that were fulfilled by a Roman execution. And I, John 12, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. But he was saying this to indicate the kind of death by which he was to die. And so you see, John, it's really, this passage in 18 is a shout out 6 chapters earlier to John chapter 12. He had laid the foreshadowing, which we see now coming to pass. But even earlier than that, we see this idea from the words of Yeshua himself, as well as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness. This is his conversation with Nicodemus. So even must the Son of Man, Bar Hinash, be lifted up, so that whoever believes will in him have eternal life. So the seeds, the idea, the concept is already laid out, and so the reader is prepared for this theological truth to be laid at his feet as he reads the passage. Now, we alluded to Judas. Where was Judas? Why was he not? His job was not just to identify Yeshua. They paid him good money. It was to be a witness. One of the problems with the witnesses that they had is that none of them were part of the inner gang, and so nobody could actually agree, and they were lying through their teeth, and they couldn't, they were distorting the words of Yeshua. If they'd actually had Judas there, he would have been able to perhaps provide something that made more sense than what they got. And if Judas had been before Pilate to actually make an accusation, then the Jewish leadership wouldn't have had a tap dance as they did before Pilate. But where was Judas? Dead by this time. And Matthew 27:5 tells us that he threw the pieces of silver, 30 pieces into the temple sanctuary, the blood money, I don't want it. And he departed, and he went away and hanged himself. So the chief witness for the prosecution, no show, because he regretted bitterly his decision. Therefore Pilate entered again into the praetorium and summoned Yeshua and said to him, and here is the question. This question is found in every one of the Gospels. This is repeated in every one of the 4 Gospels. The same question. That's how important it is. The question that Pilate asks is really the crux of Yeshua's identity. And the question is, from the Roman governor to Yeshua, are you the king of the Jews? By this time in John, we have seen multiple passages dealing with the deity of our Messiah. Not just that he's the Messiah, not just that he is the descendant of David. Of course, the synoptics really build that. They build an argument. They build a case that Yeshua is indeed the righteous and true descendant of King David and the fulfillment of the Davidic covenant, and he is the king, and eventually the Messianic age, the Messianic kingdom will be established through the throne, not of Rome or anything like that, but the throne of his father David, the rule from Jerusalem. But here we have a different emphasis, but yet the same question. Are you the king of the Jews? And we have a detailed response that we don't have anywhere else in the Gospels. What is it that Pilate's asking? King of the Jews is a loaded term. It's very much a political term. And Pilate talks political lingo. That's what he is. That's who he is. That's what he does. And as we see in Josephus, for example, in Antiquity 16, as for the king of the Jews, who was, when Josephus is writing about, the time of Herod the Great, which thing to Herod was the most agreeable and sweetest news imaginable. Anyway, Herod was the last guy called king of the Jews. When his children took over after his death, the kingdom that Herod had was split up into various different ethnarchs, tetrarchs, various different regions. But of course, we're primed again as readers, if you've been paying attention to the Gospel of John, from the beginning, back in chapter 1. Nathanael, one of the first disciples called, identifies Yeshua. Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the Messiah. You are the King of Israel. So that very phrase, King of Israel, i.e. the Messiah, everything that the ultimate Son of David would be, that pregnant concept has already been front-loaded, like so much of John gets front-loaded in the beginning, so that by the time you see it in the middle or toward the end, you are prepared with the concept. So the reader has already seen Jesus identified as the King of Israel, and so when Pilate asks, are you the King of the Jews? We already know the answer. So Yeshua answers Pilate. It's always interesting to see how Yeshua deals with authority. Instead of being cowed, instead of being on the defense, even before the great high priest and the Sanhedrin, and now even before the great Roman prefect of Judea, the fearsome Roman prefect of Judea, is now no mere politician, miserable, miserable man. Powerful, vicious. Jesus starts asking him questions. It's wonderful. Jesus, always portrayed as being in control, even when he's bound and on trial. Yeshua answered, are you saying this of your own initiative? You're asking me if I'm king of the Jews, in other words? On your own initiative? Did you figure that out on your own? Or did others tell you about me? Pilate has no patience for this. Am I a Jew? I'm not a Jew, am I? Don't draw me into this Jewish theological nonsense. I'm not interested. Your own nation, the chief priests, your big shots delivered you to me. So what have you done? You thought you were on trial before them. You haven't seen nothing. Now you're on trial before Rome. I represent Caesar. I couldn't get an accusation from the chief priests who brought you to me, so I've separated you from them. I've brought you inside, and I've got you alone, and I want to know, what are they charging you with? What have you done? Jesus answered, not directly. Goes back to, are you king of the Jews? Previous question. My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting. Oh, you can be sure of that. My servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews, the Jewish leadership. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. Let's unpack that a little bit. This has been used by many who would like to deny that there's any future kingdom where Yeshua is actually going to be ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. Well, look what he says and what he doesn't say. My kingdom is not of this world. What is this world? What does this world represent in the Gospel of John? We already know the world represents the darkness of creation, the created order that rebels against God. We've discussed with the disciples, in fact, the prayer of Yeshua in chapter 17, my disciples are in the world, but not of the world, right? So you're not living some kind of pie in the sky, denial of reality, denial of the truth in which the context in which you're living. You have to live in the world, but you are in the world, not of the world, and his kingdom is the same. My kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom is not another phony baloney, dark, violent, vicious, sinful kingdom like other governments. But he doesn't say it wouldn't be in the world in the future. But it will not be like the world's kingdoms. If my kingdom were of, see, all these ofs, my kingdom were of this, if my kingdom was like yours, we'd go to war. And Caesar would lose. Sorry to tell you. But as it is, I'll say it again, and I'll say it slightly different, using a different word. My kingdom is not of this realm. Do not think that I am in a competition with Rome or anything else. Okay? When he says realm, he's talking about not only era, okay, but an age. My kingdom is not of this time. It's not from here. It's not of this realm. It's something completely other and future, not of this age, not of this time, not of this realm, and it will not look anything like the world's kingdoms. That's why look at this, look at the language here. It's very detailed. How many times he repeats so that he would not be misunderstood. And yet, people over 2,000 years, so many people have misunderstood exactly what Yeshua was saying here. But let's press on. Therefore, Pilate said to him, all right, so kingdom of the world, not of this world, bottom line me here. So you're a king? Are you or are you not a king? I'm getting now from the fact that you have some kind of kingdom. Okay, it's a really different kingdom, whatever. But bottom line, you're a king, right? Later on, we see Pilate's a simple man, talking in political terms. That's why he puts on the cross piece, King of the Jews, as the reason for the execution of Yeshua. I don't want to get ahead of myself right now. So you see, okay, simple man, simple terms, political terms. So you're a king. Yeshua said, okay, you say correctly, I am a king. In fact, for this, I have been born. And for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. And now we circle back around to what we introduced this message with, the concept of truth, so important in the Gospel of John. I have come into the world, what? For what purpose? Why are you here? Why were you born? Why did you enter into humanity? Why did you enter into the world stage? To testify to the truth. And everyone who is of the truth, as opposed to of the world, if you are of the truth, then you can be in the world, but not of the world. In the world, but of the truth. It's the goal. I've come to testify to the truth, and everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And that takes us way back to the prologue. Remember I told you the prologue of John is like the overture of a great musical. And all the great leitmotifs and all the great musical themes that you're going to hear in the musical or in the film, you are going to be introduced to first in the prologue, in the overture. And so here it is true with truth. Verse 14, chapter 1. And the Word, Yeshua, became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of what is Yeshua, full of what characterizes him, both grace and truth, or perhaps better translated, gracious truth, with grace modifying the truth. To which Pilate responded quite famously, what is truth? And this question has beguiled humanity for 2,000 years. The nature of truth. And we will solve it all in the next 5 minutes. We will at least discuss what is truth in the next 5 or more minutes. Because Yeshua said to the disciples, the upper room, Seder meal, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So we already, as readers of the gospel, we already know from chapter 1, he's full of grace and truth. And Yeshua tells us very explicitly in his own mouth, with his own words, that because he's the truth, that makes him the way that leads to life. Is it not three? I'm a way, I'm a truth, I'm a life. He's the truth because he embodies truth. It becomes the way to life. And the only way to get to the Father is through this true way. Yeshua identified multiple times as truth. Pilate asked, what is truth? The reader of John said, I know the answer, I know that. It's Yeshua. So when Yeshua says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, we have to answer a question. Is that statement true? Did Yeshua say something that was true? And if it was true, was it Yeshua's truth? Was it his truth? by which I mean true for him, but not for the rest of us, which must have meant he was pretty deluded. Or perhaps it's your truth. Yes, I believe that Yeshua is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through Yeshua. The only way to salvation is through Yeshua. It is my truth, and I boldly, in our culture, I speak my truth. And it's true for me, but I am so culturally sensitive, I am so woke, that I dare not impose my sense of truth on you. So I can say it's true for me, but maybe not for you. Or is his statement absolutely the truth? Truth for me, for him, for you, for whosoever will. Perhaps truth is relative. I have some relatives who are not that familiar with truth. But that's not what I'm talking about. Is truth relative or is it objective? And if it is objective, that means that Yeshua is the only means through which we can have a relationship with God. John 8 speaks of the same idea. Again, words of Yeshua. Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine. And the consequence of that, of what? Of continuing in my word, in my teaching, in other words, recognizing my authority, my identity, and that what I'm teaching is true. If you continue in my word, that makes you truly, truthfully, my disciples. My disciples are identified by those who wrap themselves and dedicate themselves to my teaching, to my truths. If that's you, then you are my disciples. And if you are my disciples, look at how that chain builds. And you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. I am free today. The Word of God embodied in Yeshua has made me free. I know the truth, and I am no man's slave. I am free. Free what? Free to serve him. How about you? Are you enslaved? Enslaved. This is America, man. Nobody's enslaved today. Conversation goes on about what happened in the past, right? And some were enslaved and some were not. And here we are 150 years later, and it's still, the canker still gnaws at society. The answer is Yeshua. Because if you are free, if you have the truth, and the truth indeed, through Yeshua has set you free, you are free indeed. There are people today who are enslaved to ideologies. Ideologies such as Marxism, an alternate religion, a cult, by which if you do not swear allegiance and demonstrate fealty, society has no use for you. Not only no soup for you, no job for you, no place in society for you. You are a leper. You're disowned by society. That is an enslaving ideology I want nothing to do with. And I don't need to have anything to do with it because I know what freedom is. Some might say capitalism is enslavement. Enslaved to the mighty dollar. enslaved to our job, enslaved to society's version of what success is, enslaved to our ambition. There's so many, enslaved to our habits, enslaved to alcohol, enslaved to pornography, enslaved to all manner of vices and ills. Lots of things, no shortage of things to be enslaved to today. But we are not defined by what we were enslaved to, or what we mighta, coulda, sorta were enslaved to. We are defined by freedom. The question that must be answered is truth objective, or is it subjective or relative? If Yeshua is not the truth, if truth is not objective, if I only feel that Yeshua is the truth, I'm still enslaved. I'm enslaved to a delusion. But Yeshua said, I will know the truth, and the truth will set me free, and you as well. Do you want true freedom? Yeshua has it, and it's free of charge. The gospel is not just true for me, and it's not just true for you. It is objectively true for whosoever will. Or it is a vicious and mean-spirited lie. But if the gospel then is true, objectively, it is not relative, but it is actually reality. Do you have it today? Do you have the true freedom that comes from knowing the one who is truth, who embodies God's truth, who is God's truth? If you do not know him, if you have not yet said yes to Yeshua, not a relative yes, not a subjective yes, but an objective, good old-fashioned yes to Yeshua, then today is the day. Don't let the sun go down, which, by the way, will objectively descend, right? I can look at the stars at night tonight and say, what a lovely, bright sun we're experiencing right now. It's so bright, I want to put my shades on, right? Because relatively or subjectively, I'm experiencing my own truth. You'd look at me and you'd say, what an idiot. Which is how I want to, so loving, right? Such a loving shepherd. I want to look at our society. What a bunch of morons. But we must not expect the world to act any differently than what God tells us they're going to act like, because they are. They are defiant and rebellious against God. And while the light shines, the objective truth of our Messiah shines, they say, don't confuse us with the facts. We like our own phony baloney constructs and our own reimaginings of history and our own reality. The man wants to be a woman. How does he know he's a woman? He's never been a woman. What does a woman feel like? I don't know. Somehow he knows. The woman wants to be a man. How does she know what the man feels like? It's not like the man gabs a lot and says, let me tell you about my feelings, how I really feel. You get a lot of insights, right? It's subjective reality. It's monkey business. It's nonsense. The world is believing a lie. We must stand for the truth. And if we do not stand for the truth, we will fall, not for error, but our society, our world around us will fall. But let every man be a liar. Our Messiah is true. And so I can tell you that all truth is relative is a self-defeating line. The moment that I say all truth is relative, I have made an absolute statement of truth. And there I have contradicted myself. The only truth that is truth is objective truth. And the embodiment of objective truth is our Messiah. So, can the truth of Yeshua set you free? I said, can the truth of Yeshua set you free? Yes. Yes. Let them hear you in Minneapolis. Let them hear you in New York City. Let them hear you in Washington, D.C. Let them hear you in Los Angeles. The truth of Yeshua is the truth that is worth contending for, and freedom is found in him. All right.